peak rail belt energy consumption is about 800 megawatts. And we're facing gas shortages in this area. And we watched over the last couple of years the legislative response, backed up by the Palin-Parnell administration, was to write us $1,300 checks a couple of years ago. We gave away $800 million without doing anything to change the production or distribution of energy in the state. Uncle Sam loved it. He took about 25% in income tax. But I look at what we could have done with that money. You get 300 megawatts of power out of Chacachama Hydro. You get about 100 to 150 megawatts of power out of Mount Spur geothermal. You get 75 megawatts of wind power out of Fire Island and another 75 easily up and down the rail belt. We haven't touched in-stream hydro, we haven't touched tidal, and already we've displaced hundreds and hundreds of megawatts of gas consumption. There is just a total absence of leadership as far as this goes. You look at what's going on in rural Alaska, and I've worked on a wind diesel project in the lower Yukon-Kuskokwim region. People are paying $8 to $10 a gallon. You might think that's a lot of money, but it's worse than that because there are no economies out there. The percentage of people's income that goes to their utility bills is strangling. It's strangling. And we've got to do better. We need to make sure that the state is independent and self-reliant. Every time we import a dollar's worth of diesel, we're exporting a dollar. We're exporting a job. We need creativity. We need innovation. There's about 100 villages that can take wind. Another 150 villages that would do something with biomass. We've got geothermal everywhere. This is the rim of fire. You got up at Chino Hot Springs, Bernie Carl doing low temperature geothermal. We have the resources here. What we don't have is the leadership. And this is something that lands at the doorstep of everybody who lives in Alaska. We all have a responsibility of fixing this problem. All of us, whether we're in Anchorage or Fairbanks or Juneau or out in the bush, because our state depends on having low-cost energy. That's the source for our future and for our economy.
Thank you, Mr. Berkowitz. Mr. Walker.
We should have the lowest cost energy in the nation. We have the most energy in the nation. The reason we don't have leadership. I am so frustrated on the energy issue. Fairbanks, $24 per MCF for gas. We pay about $8 here. Take your heating bill, multiply times 3, drop the temperature about 40 degrees, and that's what we have in Fairbanks. The most expensive item on the wall in Fairbanks is no longer artwork, it's a thermostat, because it is extremely expensive to live in Fairbanks in the wintertime. People don't park in their cars in the garage in the wintertime because you don't want to open the door and lose that heat. The low-hanging fruit. Yes, I'm all about renewable energy. We have tremendous amounts of opportunity with renewable energy. The low-hanging fruit is the natural gas. My goodness. I mean, how long do we have to wait for this stuff? You know, they use, on the North Slope, in the unit up on the North Slope, if they had to actually buy that gas that they use in the unit, in Fairbanks, they pay Fairbanks' prices. If they use it for free as part of the unit, and that's fine. It would be $10.6 million a day for the fuel bill. We need to get that gas to Alaska. We need to get the Yukon River with a large volume pipeline across the river, economies of scale, take it off at the river like they do in the Norwegian countries, and they put it on barges. They compress natural gas, put it on barges, and move it up and down the river and drop the barges off in villages. There's 42 villages that would be accessed that way. They drop those barges like we change propane bottles in our barbecue. Continue on down south to Valdez with a spur line over to Turbulent, down to Kenai, get gas there, put compressed natural gas on barges and go to Dutch Harbor to Wrangell. And we should have the lowest cost energy in the nation. We have the most of it. We just need the leadership that says, we're going to do it. We're in a crisis in this state. We go up to $100 a barrel, which we're headed that way. There'll be a big surplus in Juneau, but there won't be surplus in your pocketbook. Rural Alaska is being redefined. 3 families in rural Alaska will live from one household in the wintertime to survive. So they're eating one household. Talk about social issues that are problems. So it's all about taking control of our future, some leadership that says we're going to take care of Alaska first. We're not going to re-inject our gas. 1/8 of that is just re-injected and burned on our foot belongs to everybody in this room. Everybody. We're going to take on.
Mr. Poe, would like to start the next question. Do you believe it is worth investing in a medical or law school for the state of Alaska?
Well, we've got a lot of lawyers in Alaska. I don't get the sense that we have a shortage of them. But I do think that particularly primary care docs is a real challenge. I think WWMV has done a good the program we have today that produces primary care docs has done a good job, but I think it is starting to become time. But I think we ought to think about it in a broader context. You know, this university has done a great job with nursing. The AMTHC and South Central Foundation have done a great job with rural dental techs. That's something that's not done anywhere. And what I think we ought to do as we think about a medical model is how do we do things that Alaska is uniquely capable of doing. A distance telemedicine, as an example, we're particularly able to do that. And those kinds of capabilities can be transferable to lots of other countries that, you know, don't have roads and have lots of rural folks. So I think what we ought to try to do, because there's only 680,000 Alaskans, so it's sometimes hard to justify these kind of big investments. So what we ought to do is try to link it to bigger markets. And I think that's the rural markets where they have similar rural situations or similar distributed situations like Alaska does. So generally I would support it, but I think we've got to make the market a little bit bigger.
Thank you, Mr. Poe. Mr. Samuels.
Thank you. Me and Bob are the two non-lawyers. I probably wouldn't say for a law school for doctors, if we're looking at we have a need of doctors or more nurses in there, I don't know what it would cost. So the question is, would you support a med school? Can you get a little bit pregnant? Can you get a small med school? Can you have general, some classes, not all classes, do not in specialties. I don't know how med schools work. Generally speaking, I think that you would look a long ways at different ways to get more doctors up here before you invest, you know, for a med school up here and a law school up here. I think you got plenty of lawyers on the stage.
Thank you, Mr. Samuels. Mr. Berkowitz.
Well, I'm one of these guys that was trained as a lawyer, but let me answer a medical question that Ralph asked. Ralph asked, can you get a little bit pregnant? The answer is no. Yes, we need to have a medical school. We need to have a law school here. But we're one of maybe one or two states that doesn't. We don't. And what happens is our families get broken up on account of it. That's not the way it should be. There's something I like to call the Cupid effect. You know, you send people in their 20s or early 30s off to go to school, and they find other people in their 20s or 30s, and they get married and they stay away. And why is it that Alaska is supplying our talent to help other states? We don't need to do that. We should have a law school. We've got some unique legal conditions here that if we don't train our people how to handle this, we're forever going to complain that, oh, the lawyers in Alaska, they're trained from outside, they don't get our issues, they're not familiar with them. We should train people here. And as far as a medical school goes, one of the big problems we have in Alaska is a shortage of trained medical professionals. We've got to do better. We've got to do better. And for us to say, well, it's too expensive, we can't do that. What kind of narrow vision of our future is that? Why are we preventing our students from having the opportunities to stay at home? Well, we've all agreed this is a great place to live. That's why most of us are here, right? So why are we forcing our students into exile? Let them come home. Let's give them a law school. Let's give them a medical school. Let's give them any kind of school they need. Because if we want to do things in an Alaskan way, we've got to have Alaskan schools.
I support both. You heard me talk about the medical school. I think we currently have 2.5 years of medical training in Alaska. Not that much more to conclude that. I think that's going to help solve some of the medical problems we have, shortage we have of doctors if we do that. We currently pay for 24, soon to be 30 students from Alaska to go to the University of Washington. So we're sort of paying for the first class already. So I think we're pretty close. I think we should have that. We need an economy. It costs money to do that. We need an economy, a robust economy in order to do that. On the law school side, you know, when I went to law school, my wife and I went to law school. We saw many people there going to law school at night. It was a very robust evening course. So people that wanted to go in the evening, couldn't disrupt their lifestyle and their family and move halfway across the country or down south. They wanted to go to law school at night. Maybe it took them a year or two longer, but allowed them to earn that additional degree, you know, while still, you know, working during the day. And the average age of our law school was older than most, perhaps. So I think it gives the opportunity. I mean, I know it's, I mean, lawyers aren't all that popular. I certainly understand why. But I think it gives an educational opportunity for our young people that can't really you know, have a good job. I don't want to leave my job to go to law